Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're exploring how to make your writing and thinking clear and impactful.
Love that.
We're going to be talking about the Minto Pyramid Principle,
Yes.
which is a guide to structuring communication,
Yeah.
kind of using a pyramid shape.
Yeah.
So think of it as like a secret weapon
Mm-hmm.
for better presentations reports or even just thinking more clearly.
It's so fascinating because this book, it starts with this idea of information overload,
Okay.
that feeling when you have a grocery list,
Yeah.
that's way too long.
Yeah.
And you can only remember like half the things on it.
Yes, and then I end up forgetting the thing I actually needed.
Of course, the most important thing.
Yeah, always the most important thing.
That's exactly what Minto uses to like illustrate this idea that our short-term memory, it has limitations.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
can only hold on to, a certain number of ideas at once. And so that's why like how we structure information is so important.
Gotcha.
It helps our brains just like make sense of all these complex ideas.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the connection here. But how does a pyramid help with that?
So the pyramid, it acts as like this framework.
Okay.
And you begin with the most important point, which is like your governing thought
Uh-huh.
at the top. And then you break it down into supporting arguments and so on and so on.
Okay.
It's like creating a roadmap for whoever's listening to you or reading what you're writing
Gotcha.
to kind of guide them through your logic.
Yeah, it's more than just making things organized, though, right?
Right.
Like, what's the real benefit here for someone like me?
So like a big one is clarity,
Oh, okay.
because the pyramid structure forces you to prioritize what your message is.
Uh-huh.
You have to figure out, like, what do you absolutely need your audience to understand?
Okay.
And this makes your communication just very clear and easy to follow.
So no more rambling and losing people in the weeds.
Exactly.
I like it.
And it saves you so much time
Oh, really?
because it helps you to streamline your thinking.
Okay.
So you're ensuring that every single piece of information in your communication is relevant
Oh.
and it's presented in a logical order.
So it's like a productivity hack
Yeah,
and a communication enhancer all in one.
I love that.
I like it.
Yeah.
But Minto also claims that it can make you more persuasive.
Right.
How does that work?
So when you have a well-structured argument that's built using this pyramid principle, it just naturally becomes more compelling.
Okay.
You're not just like asserting things. You're taking your audience through this really clear line of reasoning and showing them how you arrived at your conclusions.
Gotcha.
And that makes your ideas just seem more credible and convincing.
Okay. I am on board with that. But how do we actually build one of these pyramids?
Yeah.
Like, where do we even begin?
So it all starts with the governing thought.
Okay.
And this is that single most important takeaway,
Okay.
that you want your audience to get the peak of your pyramid.
So let's say I'm writing a report on a new marketing campaign.
Yeah.
My governing thought could be, this campaign is going to be wildly successful.
It's a good start. But remember that your governing thought has to be like a complete statement.
Uh-huh.
And it should directly answer the audience's key question.
Okay.
So it should be something more like, this campaign will dramatically increase brand awareness because it leverages this unique approach and targets this specific demographic.
Oh, so you're not just stating a conclusion,
Yes.
you're giving the why behind it.
Yeah.
Okay, so once we figure that out, how do we build out the rest of the pyramid?
So you're going to break down your argument into like supporting points,
Okay.
each of them logically answering the questions that are raised by the point above it.
Okay.
And Minto gives us these two main ways to group these ideas together,
Uh-huh.
deductive and inductive reasoning.
Oh, I remember those terms from school, but can you refresh my memory? What's the difference?
So deductive reasoning, it follows this classic pattern. If A, then B, therefore C.
Right.
It's very logical. And Minto uses this example. Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is moral.
Okay, so you start with like a general premise
Yeah.
and work your way down to a more specific conclusion.
Exactly.
What about inductive reasoning?
So inductive reasoning is more about grouping like similar ideas or observations together,
Mm-hmm.
and then you draw like a broader inference from them.
Okay.
So imagine you notice several different departments in a company, and they're struggling with communication breakdowns.
Yeah.
You might inductively conclude that there's like a systemic communication problem within the whole organization.
Oh, so deductive is more about logic and certainty,
Yeah.
and inductive is more about drawing conclusions based on patterns and evidence.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so you've grouped your points, but how do you decide what order they go in?
Right.
And does that even matter?
Absolutely. The order within each level of your pyramid is super important.
Okay.
And Minto outlines these three main ways to organize them:
Okay.
time order, structural order, and degree.
Okay. Break those down for me.
Yeah, so time order is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
If you are explaining a process,
Uh-huh.
you present the steps chronologically.
This happens and this happens and that happens.
Except.
Structural order is more about like mirroring like a pre-existing structure.
Okay.
So for example, if you were analyzing the different divisions of a company, you might organize your points based on the company's org chart.
So you're making your points kind of fit the existing structure.
Exactly.
Clever and degree, that's about importance, right?
Yes. So let's say you're giving like a presentation on a new product.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to start with the most compelling feature first,
Right.
and then kind of work your way down.
So it's like strategizing the impact of your information.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see just how much thought goes into crafting a truly effective pyramid.
Yeah.
But there's something else Minto warns against that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
These intellectually blank assertions.
Yeah.
What are those, and why are they such a communication killer?
So imagine someone saying, we need to improve our website for 3 reasons.
Okay.
And then they just never explain what those reasons are.
Ah.
Like they've piqued your interest,
Yeah.
but they just haven't given you the information.
Right.
And that's a very common trap. We make these vague statements without actually providing any real evidence or explanation.
So it's like a fancy way of saying, because I said so.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And this is where the pyramid principle is really helpful.
Okay.
It forces you to actually think through each of your points and make sure they are very clearly explained and supported by evidence.
It's like having a built-in BS detector for your own thinking.
Yeah.
This is so useful.
Yeah.
It feels like this mental checklist to make sure my arguments are clear, complete, and actually convincing.
It is. And that's the power of the Minto Pyramid Principle.
Yeah.
It's not just about writing. It's a tool that you can apply to all kinds of communication.
Well, that's a perfect segue because in part 2, we are going to dive into some of those applications.
Yeah.
We'll explore how the pyramid can help us tackle complex problems, make killer presentations, and even sharpen our visual thinking skills. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Minto Pyramid Principle.
We're about to get into some really interesting applications of this pyramid power.
Yeah.
Especially for those of you who deal with like complex problems on a regular basis.
So Minto dedicates a whole section of her book to using the pyramid for problem solving.
Okay.
And it's super insightful. It's all about bringing structure to what can often feel like such a messy process.
I like it. Okay, so where do we even begin when we're faced with a problem that just seems huge and complicated?
So the first step is defining the problem clearly. And I know that sounds obvious.
Right.
But Minto argues that we often jump to solutions before we actually fully understand what it is we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I can definitely see myself doing that.
So how do we do that?
Right.
How do we crystallize a problem?
Right.
She provides this framework that can be surprisingly helpful even for problems that seem like just tangled messes.
Okay.
It involves identifying 4 key elements: the situation, the complication, the question, and the answer.
Okay, I'm already feeling more organized just hearing those categories. Like, break those down for me. What exactly do they mean?
Okay, so let's start with the situation.
Okay.
Think of this as like the background, the context where the problem exists.
Okay.
It's what everyone already knows or accepts as true.
So if I'm dealing with low employee morale, the situation could be something like, our company has recently gone through a merger, and there's been a lot of uncertainty and change.
Exactly. You're painting a backdrop, you're setting the stage, and then comes the complication.
Okay, what's the complication in this scenario?
So the complication is what changed in that situation to create the problem.
Okay.
It's that trigger that makes people think, oh, something's not right here.
So for our morale problem, the complication could be a recent employee survey revealed a significant drop in morale scores across all departments.
Perfect. It's the new development that disrupts the status quo and demands attention. And then think about what question naturally arises from those 2 pieces of information, and that's the question element.
Okay, so in this case, the question would be something like, how do we improve employee morale after this disruptive merger?
You got it. The complication created this gap in our knowledge, and the question is, how do we bridge that gap?
Okay, this framework is already helping me to see the problem more clearly. It's like those Where's Waldo pictures, suddenly you know what to look for. But what about that final piece? The answer.
So the answer is the solution to the problem.
Okay.
It's the heart of what you're going to communicate.
Okay.
It's the what we should do about it part.
I love how this framework just brings so much structure to something that can feel so nebulous. It's like we've built a container for the problem before we even start trying to solve it.
That's a great way to put it. And remember Minto's warning about intellectually blank assertions.
Right.
They could really muddy the waters when we're defining a problem.
We have to be specific. We have to avoid vague language. So instead of just saying morale is low, we need to pinpoint the actual issues affecting morale.
Exactly. Maybe it's lack of communication from leadership, or maybe it's concerns about job security, until you identify those specific issues. You can't develop effective solutions.
Yeah.
It's like going to the doctor and just saying, I don't feel good. You know, you need to give them more information so they can actually help you.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so we've defined the problem using this situation, complication, question answer framework. What's next?
Now we need to understand the causes of the problem.
Okay.
And this is where diagnostic frameworks come into play.
Okay.
They help us to break down the problem and analyze the root causes in a structured way.
I have a feeling this is where things could get a bit complicated. Give me the rundown on these diagnostic frameworks.
So Minto suggests there are three main types.
Yeah.
There are frameworks that show physical structure.
Yeah.
There are those that trace cause and effect, and those that classify.
Okay. I need examples. How would those different types of frameworks actually work in the real world?
Okay, so let's imagine you're trying to improve a manufacturing process that's been plagued by delays. You could create a flowchart to visually represent each step in the process.
Gotcha.
So that's a framework showing physical structure.
So by mapping it out visually, you might spot bottlenecks or inefficiencies that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
Exactly. Or let's say you're dealing with customer complaints about a new product. You could use the logic tree to trace the potential causes.
Uh-huh.
Each branch of the tree would represent a different possible cause, leading to a more granular understanding of the issue.
So it's like this branching narrative of if this, then that, leading you through all the potential culprits.
Precisely, it helps you explore all the possibilities in a very systematic way. And the third type, classification frameworks, this helps you group the causes of a problem into distinct categories. So for example, if you're analyzing the reasons for high employee turnover, you might classify the causes into categories related to compensation, work environment, and career development opportunities.
This is making me realize how often we try to solve the symptoms of a problem without actually addressing the underlying causes.
And that's precisely what these frameworks help us to avoid. They force us to take a step back, analyze the situation, and understand those root causes before jumping to solutions.
Okay, so we've defined the problem, and we've used a diagnostic framework to understand the causes. What happens next?
Now, the fun part is brainstorming solutions.
Okay.
And you can guess that the pyramid principle can guide us here as well.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. So how do we use the pyramid to structure our solutions?
So Minto suggests that we group our action ideas by the effect that they will produce. This helps us to create logical groupings of solutions that all contribute to a common goal.
So instead of just having this random list of ideas, we categorize them by the outcome we want to achieve.
Exactly. So let's say we're brainstorming ways to boost employee morale. We might have a group of actions focused on improving communication, another group focused on enhancing professional development opportunities, and so on.
This is making me realize just how powerful the pyramid is as a tool for creating order out of chaos. It's like it imposes this sense of logic and purpose on every stage of the problem-solving process.
That's a great way to put it. And when it comes to communicating those solutions, remember Minto's advice about being specific and avoiding those intellectually blank assertions. So instead of saying improve training programs, say implement a new leadership development program that focuses on coaching skills and feedback techniques.
I see what you mean. It's about making sure that each action step has a clear, measurable outcome. So if I were writing a report recommending solutions to our morale problem, how would I use the pyramid to structure that?
So you'd start with your governing thought, which is essentially your main recommendation. It might be something like, to boost employee morale, we need to implement a three-pronged strategy focusing on communication development and recognition. And then you would use the pyramid to break down each of those prongs, supporting them with the specific actions you've identified.
This is amazing. I'm starting to see how I could apply this to so many situations at work and even in my personal life. But isn't there a risk of the pyramid becoming too rigid? Sometimes problem solving requires flexibility and creative thinking.
That's a really insightful question. The pyramid isn't meant to stifle creativity. It's about providing a framework to help you think more clearly and strategically.
So it's like a scaffolding, not a cage. It provides support, but it allows room for creative problem solving within that structure.
Exactly. And remember, every problem is unique.
Yeah.
You might need to adapt the pyramid slightly depending on the situation. The key is understanding the principles behind it so you can apply them in a way that makes sense for your specific needs.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for tackling problems effectively. But there's one more area I'm eager to explore: visual communication.
And that's a perfect segue to part 3. We'll dive into how the pyramid can help us create clear, concise, and visually compelling presentations.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll take all these powerful principles and make them come alive on the screen. Welcome back to the deep dive.
We're wrapping up our exploration of the Minto Pyramid Principle.
And we've covered so much. We talked about how the pyramid can help us, think more clearly, write more persuasively, and even solve like these huge, complex problems.
Right.
But I'm excited to talk about something that's become so essential in today's world:
Yeah.
visual communication.
It's interesting that you use the word essential because that's exactly how Minto views the role of visuals in communication.
Okay.
In fact, she argues that the pyramid principle is even more crucial when we're communicating visually,
Okay.
especially when it comes to presentations.
Why is that? Is it just because presentations are so visual by nature?
It's more than that. Presentations are dynamic. You have a live audience, and their attention spans can be pretty limited.
Yeah, I've definitely been that audience member checking my phone, daydreaming.
Exactly. So as a presenter, you need to capture and hold their attention.
Right.
And the pyramid helps you do that by structuring your presentation in a way that's easy to follow and visually engaging.
Okay, I'm with you on the why.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually translate this pyramid principle into a killer presentation?
Yeah.
Do we just slap our pyramid structure onto a bunch of slides and call it a day?
I think a lot of people try that approach,
Yeah.
but Minto cautions against it. Remember, the goal is to be visually driven. Your slides should be visual aids, not just a regurgitation to your script in bullet points.
So less text, more visuals.
Precisely, think charts, diagrams, compelling images, things that illustrate your key points.
Okay.
Use text sparingly, mainly to highlight the structure of your presentation or emphasize key takeaways.
So no more slides crammed with bullet points.
Think of it this way. Your slides should complement your spoken words, not repeat them verbatim.
Gotcha.
They should add a visual layer to your message, helping the audience to grasp your ideas more quickly and remember them more easily.
So it's about striking that perfect balance between text and visuals. Are there any other techniques that Minto recommends for making our presentations super engaging?
One technique she highlights is build slides.
Build slides with that.
So imagine a slide with several different elements.
Yeah.
A chart, a quote, a key takeaway.
Okay.
Instead of showing everything all at once, you reveal each element gradually as you explain it.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It keeps the audience focused on what you're saying, and it prevents them from getting overwhelmed by like too much information all at once.
Exactly. It's like creating this sense of anticipation and discovery.
Uh-huh.
You're guiding the audience through your thinking step by step. And remember, a good presentation is like telling a story.
Yeah.
It needs a clear beginning, middle, and end.
Okay, so how do we use the pyramid principle to structure the flow of our presentation, to make it feel like a compelling story?
Just like with writing or problem solving, it starts with the governing thought.
Okay.
This is the main message you want your audience to walk away with. Introduce it early on to set the stage for the rest of your presentation.
So it's like the thesis statement of your presentation. It tells everyone where you're going and why they should care.
Precisely. And then you break down that governing thought into your key supporting points, just like we talked about with the pyramid structure. And remember, those points should be supported by evidence and ideally visuals that bring your ideas to life.
And we can organize those points using time order, structural order, or degree, right? Just like we've discussed before.
You got it. The order you choose should feel natural and logical to your audience.
Okay.
It's about guiding them through your thinking in a way that makes sense and builds momentum.
I'm starting to see how all these different pieces fit together: the pyramid structure, the visuals, the storytelling aspect. It's really like a holistic approach to communication.
That's what I love about the Minto Pyramid Principle. It's not just a set of rules. It's a way of thinking about communication strategically and effectively.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things Minto emphasizes is this power of thinking visually throughout the entire process, even before you start creating your slides.
What do you mean by thinking visually? Is it just like picturing what the slides might look like?
It's more about visualizing the relationships between your ideas.
Okay.
Before you even open up PowerPoint, try to map out your presentation mentally. Imagine the flow, the key points, the visuals that would best illustrate your message.
So it's like creating this mental storyboard for your presentation before you even touch the computer. I like that. But Minto also talks about the importance of sweating the small stuff, like the transitions between slides. Why does that matter so much?
Transitions are like the connective tissue that holds your presentation together.
Okay.
They help to create this smooth, engaging flow, connecting your ideas and preventing your presentation from feeling choppy or disjointed.
Oh, so it's about creating a seamless experience for the audience,
Exactly.
so they can focus on the message without getting distracted by these awkward jumps between ideas.
Exactly. And finally, and I know this one might seem obvious, Minto stresses the importance of rehearsing your presentation.
I'm guessing this goes way beyond just memorizing your lines.
It's not just about memorization. It's about getting comfortable with the material, familiarizing yourself with the flow, and fine-tuning your delivery so that you come across as confident and engaging.
So it's about practicing until the presentation feels natural, like a conversation rather than a rehearsed speech.
Precisely. That's when the magic happens, when your passion for the topic shines through and you genuinely connect with your audience.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the Minto Pyramid Principle.
Yeah, it's such a great book.
We've explored so much, from structuring our thinking to crafting compelling presentations.
Mm-hmm.
And it all boils down to this surprisingly simple yet powerful idea:
Right.
organizing our ideas in a hierarchical pyramid shape.
Yeah.
It's a tool that can truly benefit anyone, regardless of their profession or area of expertise.
It's about empowering ourselves to become clearer, more concise, and ultimately more persuasive communicators.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Minto Pyramid Principle. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we have.
Absolutely. And remember, the next time you're facing a communication challenge, think of the pyramid. It might just be the secret weapon you need to make your message clear, compelling, and impossible to ignore.